Hey everyone, welcome back for my review on the Retroid Pocket 2S. Now, I took a little time trying to test out this device after my initial impressions video. In that time, everyone seemed to be going a little bonker balls about this device. However, I just kind of didn't quite get on that bandwagon. Stick around, and I'll tell you why. If you watched my impressions video, it was my experience with this device from the unboxing to a slight setup. One thing I will reiterate from that video is that this is not a plug-and-play, right out of the box device. You have to set everything up. I know that might not be an issue for some, but I actually get a lot of comments on how to install apps, get everything working on your handheld. The 2S doesn't have anything preloaded on it, so that means you will need to add ROMs, add emulators, Android games, and really anything else you want on here. It's Android, so you need to understand how to use it, which still some people have trouble with in 2023, especially when talking about retro handhelds with Android OS. There is a section in this setup menu that allows you to pick from some pre-configured apps that Retroid thought you might need or want. Now, I might just take note of that list and get most of the emulators from the Google Play Store. The reason for that is when you get the apps from the Play Store, you are getting the most up-to-date version of the app, and they will get automatic updates. Those other versions that Retroid put on here typically won't get updated, and who knows how old they are. So since this is an Android device, you can definitely just set it up like you would your phone or your tablet. But you can also use some apps that are called front ends that will make navigating through the device a little easier and look way cooler. So I showed a little bit of this in my impressions video. Retroid has their own front end that you can use that looks very similar to the Nintendo Switch. It's neat and simple and seems to work pretty decently. There are also a bunch of different front ends out there that you can download. I'm not going to go over all of them in this video, but I will just show you two of them. Dig was listed in the pre-configured setup section. It seems a bit dated and I had a hard time getting new themes installed. Now, I personally like the front-end app Daigisho. I was trying to test out other front ends due to the screen size. I felt like Daigisho might show up a little too small for the screen. Also a glitch with Daigisho in the RP2S is that the front end doesn't recognize the triggers. Normally you can use L2 and R2 to navigate through the systems, but you can't on this device. However, you are able to go into the Daigisho settings and map other buttons, like maybe I used L3 and R3 to do that, and it'll work out just fine, as you can see here. So this device is very similar to the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. The RP2S is using a T610 processor, which is just below the T618 chip that is in the RP3 Plus and a ton of other devices out in the wild. The expectation is that it should have pretty similar performance to that of the RP3 Plus. Another feature is that it has Hall effect sensor sticks. Typically, most of the devices end up using short Nintendo Switch style thumbsticks. Hall sensor sticks are super nice to use. I really hope that we will see them in more retro handhelds in the future. The RP2S has two different versions that you can order. There is a 3 gig RAM version with 32 gigs of internal storage, and there is a 4 gig RAM version with 128 gigs of internal storage. Now here is a caution for new users. This is just a little recommendation from me, but be mindful of this because the 2S is running Android 11. All the games and apps that you install will be on the internal storage of the device. If you get the base model, it's only 32 gigs of onboard storage. But we have to take into account that the operating system alone eats up almost half of the onboard storage. So your 32 gigs of storage is down to what, 12-ish gigs? Here is a shot of the storage of my RP2S after I installed all the pre-configured apps that Retroid recommended when you were setting it up. That with the operating system takes up almost 15 gigs. So you have close to 12 gigs of room to install your ROMs, Android games, and anything you want to put on here. I don't have a front end on here either. That's why they don't make 32 gig phones anymore. If they still do, you should stay away from those. So you only have 10 to 12 gigs maybe of storage. That's before you load apps, games, RetroArch, emulators, and anything else that you want on there. That 10 gigs is going to get filled up pretty fast. Android OS doesn't enjoy running on fumes, so you might want to keep a gig or two free so that the device can actually run correctly. So that brings up my next point about the mythical $99 price point. You need an SD card. Now, if you have a ton of these laying around, awesome, high five. However, you will need one with a decent amount of storage, 64 gigs or more at least, depending on what game systems you are playing. The higher the system, the bigger the game files. So that's another cost involved that you need to consider. Or, this is where my recommendation comes in. You can just get the upgraded version with 4 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage. Then you don't need to worry about an SD card. But keep in mind that that's another $20 plus shipping. Okay, after all that, let's get to the game testing. Now, just to recap the specs, this T610 chipset didn't have any trouble with the 8-bit and 16-bit games. I still like showing off the gameplay for a quick second just so you can see how it looks on the screen in relation to the aspect ratio. Everything really up through PSP runs great. The aspect ratio of the RP2S screen is 4:3. That is great for the lower end stuff. However, with some higher end systems that have an aspect ratio of 16:9, it actually makes those systems look a little goofy on the screen. When we get into N64, Sega Saturn, Dreamcast, PSP, you will notice some black bars on the screen. And they aren't on the side, like you might see on other devices. They are weirdly at the top and the bottom, creating a letterboxing look of your games. It's a little bizarre and annoying at times. Also, I will mention that if you swipe down on the notification bar, the device has a few modes. There's a balance mode, which I use for everything PS1 and below, performance for your middle ground systems like Dreamcast, N64, Sega Saturn, and PSP, and then the extreme mode for GameCube and up. Dreamcast, Sega Saturn, and N64 played really well on this device. Just as I listed earlier, I have these mid-range systems using the performance mode. Now for PSP, I still consider this a mid-range system. However, when I tried loading any game through PPSSPP, I got an error saying that it was running slow. So I used the extreme mode with these games, and I think they played pretty well. Chains of Olympus is always a game I test because it's the high end of PSP. The 2S didn't struggle a whole lot, but there was some lag here and there. So with GameCube, I definitely had to tweak the settings. In fact, I couldn't get both of these games to run well on the same emulator. One is through the Dolphin handheld emulator, and then the other is through MMJR. You can see that there was some heavy graphical issues despite any of the tweaks that I set up. So I just had to end up using different emulators. Another tip, if you are having issues with a specific game, try to use the PAL ROM instead of the NTCS or US ROM. PAL ROMs run at 50 frames per second versus the 60 frames per second on the US ROMs. So with PS2 emulation, it depends on the game. Later games will generally perform okay. I would definitely turn on that performance mode on the 2S to help. Just like with GameCube, you may need to tweak the settings per game. Also keep in mind that the emulator Ether SX2 has been abandoned, and is no longer going to get updates. So the version we have here is what we are stuck with. Finally, I am always obligated to show God of War. You can see that it's definitely struggling. I have a giant underclock on, and it's working, but it's not really going to be playable in my opinion. This is a little rough. So I'm a bit disappointed with how some of my favorite Android games play on the 2S. So number one, Vampire Survivors and Rocket League Sideswipe aren't available for this device in the Google Play Store, as you can see here by the picture. Not a huge deal for Vampire Survivors, but you won't be able to use any of the DLCs if you sideload the game. But you can't really sideload Rocket League Sideswipe. I mean, the whole point of the game is to play against other players online, which you can't do if you sideload it. I honestly didn't even look for an APK, so who knows if it even exists. Number two, it seems to take Dead Cells a bit longer than usual to load. When it did finally load, I had a hard time playing it because I couldn't even read the text due to the screen being so small. That's a bummer because Dead Cells is a great game that everyone should play. Also, I have a few videos that showcase what Android games play on retro handhelds. Keep in mind that the games can be device specific, but I would definitely recommend watching those. So let's go over the good and the bad of the RP2S. The Hall effect sensor sticks were amazing to play with. It was so nice to not have to use the normal squatty Nintendo Switch sticks. These were a very nice welcomed addition. I really hope that more companies start using them in their handhelds. The front-facing speakers. Having the speakers on the front is just awesome. The sound is clear and loud, and instead of being muffled into your hands. The analog triggers are a nice touch. Much nicer to use than the digital triggers. And it's portable. Even with the 3.5-inch screen and the bigger sticks, I would still consider this a portable, pocketable device. I just might recommend getting a 3D printed case to cover the screen and the sticks. Now for the bad. So I had so many issues with the small 3.5-inch screen. I just wish that they used a bezel-less screen and maybe made the device a little bit bigger for a larger screen. The small screen size makes using the touchscreen very difficult at times. Also on some games, like I mentioned, Dead Cells for example, the screen is just too small so you can't read the text. And there's unnecessary black bars on certain games that are 16:9, the 4:3 aspect ratio, which you usually get that, but you definitely notice it when you are using 4:3 aspect ratio screen. It is not ergonomic, so the style of this handheld was very hard to use over time. I found my hands cramping from testing out everything so much. Maybe that won't be an issue for some with larger hands. Sure, you can go buy a 3D grip from Retroid for $15, but maybe Retroid should have thought of putting some ergonomic bumps on the back. And the old but new style. While I'm sure the 2S is a welcome brick style device that is reminiscent of the RP2 and the 2 Plus, I'm not a fan. I just kept thinking, why did they bring back the RP2 series? Let's move forward and try new styles instead of bringing old styles back from the dead. Kind of what Apple did with their SE phone line. I mean, this is about 9 months or so after the RP3 Plus. Judging from how Retroid has been releasing their devices in the last 2 years, I thought for sure they would be announcing the RP4, or whatever they might be calling the future device. Nope, old but new. And I mentioned this before, but this device comes very, very bare bones. It's not out of the box ready. Yes, there are some pre-configured apps that you can install, but it's not plug and play out of the box experience. There's no games on here, so while that's a huge issue for many that have been in the space for a while, it's something that I want to reiterate to the new user out there. And now this isn't really specific to the device, but I wanted to mention the shipping time. I just got the Anbernic RG405V, after only ordering it a couple weeks ago. With the RP2S, it was almost 6 weeks just because I ordered the green color. Come on, Retroid, get your shipping times together here. So in the end, who is this device for? Maybe someone who has an older retro handheld that wants to upgrade. All the RP2 and 2 Plus users should certainly upgrade to this. But if you have a 3 Plus or an RP Flip, why bother? I will recommend it to you new users with a giant caution that you need to understand that you have to set up everything here. And I mean everything. I know I keep saying that, but it's everything. I feel like anyone that is in this hobby space already may have a handheld more powerful than this. But maybe you want to ditch your RG35XX or Miu Mini and get something bigger with more features, but you're still able to throw a device in your pocket. Sure, then maybe this is a good fit. Throughout all my testing, it's not terrible. I'm not saying that this is a bad device by any means. The RB2S is very good in many aspects. I love the Hall effect sticks. Those things are just a delight to play with, and I hope they become a standard in the handheld industry now. But the screen, the resolution is good, but the 4:3 aspect ratio ends up putting a lot of black bars on the sides or letterboxing some systems, which results in an even smaller screen. Plus, anything touchscreen, I wouldn't want to play on here. I have pretty small hands and it was difficult for me to type. I don't think anyone with bigger hands than me would really enjoy the touchscreen at all. And if you are planning on playing anything with a lot of text, just don't. You won't enjoy it because chances are you can't read it. I actually struggled with this device because for the first time, I actually wasn't a huge fan of it and I wanted to be. So I didn't want this to be a big negative review, but I just wanted to give my honest opinion, which is that this might not be the best device for some. So I will leave you with that. But those are my thoughts, not yours. Leave any and all comments below. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, I just got the Anbernic RG405V, so look for that review soon. Stay awesome, everyone, and go play some games.